a route that no one had ever conquered before. Nearly 1,000 miles in the cold waters of the most dangerous ocean in the world. Waves as tall as a five-story building, sharks, currents, and complete solitude. On January 11, 2007, Australian traveler and adventurer Andrew McAuley set out to cross from the Bay of Tasmania Island to Milford Sound on the southwestern coast of New Zealand, using only a kayak. Equipped with a protective suit, necessary gear, and a supply of food, he set off in a specially prepared kayak, traveling alone for almost a month, covering dozens of kilometers daily using only paddles. According to the plan, his adventure was supposed to take a month. During this time, his wife and 3-year-old son waited for him on shore. Every day, McAuley sent a message to his family via satellite phone. What could have gone wrong on this journey? Well, honestly, almost everything. He intended to do what no other daredevil had achieved. Andrew McAuley's entire route traveled below the 14th parallel, the heart of the roaring 40s feared by sailors for its treacherous weather and unforgiving storms. Now imagine, this is not a well-equipped vessel, but a very narrow boat. Only 2 previous attempts had been made, both by New Zealander Paul Cathan, both unsuccessful. However, many days later, Andrew McAuley was still alive. His kayak appeared off the coast of New Zealand. A series of nightmare storms and incidents were behind him. The sea was relatively calm. The peaks of the southern Alps of New Zealand were already close enough to be seen on the horizon. And in that very moment, when he had only 150 kilometers left to go, his family received a chilling message and video from Andrew. February 9, 2007. The Tasman Sea.
Right here, what you got in kayaker, hit up. Emergency situation. Kayak. Yeah.
His family, friends, and the worldwide paddling community were left with a mystery. So what happened to the experienced kayaker at the very end of his month-long journey? Did he manage to complete the route? Is he still alive? Why did he leave such a terrifying message? This is the story of Andrew McAuley, a man who set out to break a world record but ended up shocking everyone. And now, I will tell you in detail how it all ended. Andrew McAuley was born on August 7, 1968, in the Australian town of Goulburn. As a child, he would go swimming, climb trees, and even dive off cliffs with his brother, like many children. By the time he undertook his grand journey across the ocean, McAuley was a 39-year-old IT consultant from a suburb of Sydney. On the surface, he seemed an unlikely candidate for such a trip, right? In reality, he had every reason to believe that this challenge was within his reach. Andrew spent nearly 10 years preparing for the trip. Prior to catching the kayaking bug on the late 1990s trip in the Chilean fjords, McAuley devoted his considerable energies to mountaineering, making first ascents in Pakistan, Patagonia, and Australia. And he did it in the style of exploratory climbs. In other words, he found new routes and was the first to climb them, with all the associated risks. However, during one expedition, Andrew sustained an injury, which led him to switch to kayaking. In the late 90s, after being caught in a severe storm while mountaineering, he and his friends kayaked through mountain gorges and successfully completed a journey. It was then that the daring adventurer realized the power of the sport and began setting himself bold challenges. In 2003, Andrew McAuley became the first person to kayak a direct, non-stop crossing of the notoriously treacherous Bay Strait. a highly perilous stretch of water between mainland Australia and the island of Tasmania. In total, his 250-kilometer journey took 35 hours of continuous paddling. Andrew's next journey involved nearly an 800-kilometer route along the coast of Antarctica through the Gulf of Carpentaria, located in northern Australia. This time, the journey took Andrew McAuley a week, and he had become accustomed to sleeping in his kayak. For this achievement, in 2005, the Australian Geographic Society awarded him the title of Adventurer of the Year. The following year, Andrew led an Australian Antarctic expedition, during which kayakers completed an 800-kilometer passage along the coast of Antarctica. It was evident that McAuley had become an experienced sea kayaker with hundreds of hours of dangerous expeditions under his belt. Therefore, when he announced that he now planned to cross the Tasman Sea, a perilous and vast stretch of water between Australia and New Zealand, many considered it possible. Nevertheless, the Australian police and the Australian Search and Rescue Service tried to dissuade him. They, quote, strongly advised against the trip, calling it inherently dangerous. Authorities went so far as to test McAuley's equipment by capsizing his kayak and assessing its self-righting properties. However, they had to acknowledge that all the equipment was suitable for his endeavor and granted him permission. How exactly did he achieve this? But let's go step by step. To achieve his long-held dream, Andrew had to solve a number of significant problems, and the biggest of them was, of course, the kayak. So, step number 1. The kayak. A regular turning kayak was not suitable for such a journey. Andrew decided to approach a company called Mirage Sea Kayaks, where engineer Paul Hewitson modified a standard turning kayak, a 19-foot Mirage, to allow Andrew to sleep and wait out storms. The main feature of the kayak was a custom-made fiberglass canopy. It resembled an inverted bucket and was attached to the kayak with levers. During the day, the canopy could be folded back and positioned behind Andrew, while at night it would seal him in. Andrew drew a cheerful face on it and called it Casper. The canopy locked over Andrew was designed to keep the kayaker dry and, in the event of capsizing, to allow the sealed kayak to self-right. With this device, Andrew could sleep peacefully at night and weather any storm, including severe ones. A yacht ventilator atop the canopy provided ventilation when upright and kept water out when submerged. Also, an oversized cockpit and lack of a standard seat made it impossible to roll. Okay, the kayak was ready and looked reliable. The second step was safety. Fitting a month's worth of provisions on a single kayak was no easy task. However, the kayak carried not only provisions, dry rations, and canned goods but even desserts for every other day of the journey. The Mirage kayak was equipped with a water desalinator, a satellite phone with an additional battery, an emergency radio beacon, and a GPS beacon. Before the adventure began, Andrew informed the authorities that his primary means of communication would be one daily contact at 5:30 p.m. via SMS on his satellite phone, and he would transmit his location using the GPS beacon. He planned to stick to this routine and didn't expect anything to go wrong, although he had all the necessary emergency rescue devices. Nevertheless, for most of the journey, he relied only on the daily SMS to his wife and, occasionally, phone calls home. As we've already heard, he also used the distress signal when the time came, but we'll get to that a bit later. Now let's talk about Andrew's route. The path he chose for himself was particularly harsh. Stormy conditions are inevitable in this part of the ocean. Tropical cyclones, variable winds, low pressure zones, and rare weather windows characterize the so-called roaring 40s. Sea kayakers and sailors spend a lot of time talking about the weather. The wind, waves, and the sea state have an enormous influence on progress at sea. Andrew McAuley paid special attention to forecasting. Each day during this expedition, Veteran sailor Jonathan Bongay sent him a weather forecast analysis for his position. In return, Andrew provided local weather observations. Local observations of cloud formations, wind, and surface pressure are all valuable tools that can allow accurate forecasting of local conditions. Andrew also used a satellite tracking system that regularly transmitted his exact location to the ground crew. Of course, this aspect of his plan was the most vulnerable. Even diverse forecasts cannot guarantee that the weather will not change unexpectedly. However, Andrew's kayak was designed to withstand even very severe storms, and if necessary, he just had to wait out the storm, bobbing in a hermetically sealed kayak as if he were inside a washing machine on full spin cycle. Andrew understood all this, commenting on the upcoming trip with these words: "I take risks, but they are calculated risks, and I want to be beyond criticism." McAuley wanted to become the first person in the world to successfully kayak this route. So, after many years of preparation, everything was ready. Andrew McAuley finally sat in his kayak and set off. Later, while going through the video recordings Andrew made during the journey, his widow Vicky would discover a secret confession. "I wish," McAuley said to himself, "that Vicky had asked me not to go." However, this could be attributed to the extreme fatigue, longing, and fear of a man in the middle of a turbulent ocean in a narrow piece of plastic. It's unlikely that the adventure he had prepared for 10 years would end before it even began. In this video, Andrew paddles away from the familiar shore on December 2, 2006. At 8:30 in the morning, Australian Customs stamped Andrew's passport and cleared him out of the country. His wife and son wish him luck, and Andrew paddled away as quickly as possible, tears streaming down his face. He was terrified that he might never see his wife and son again. The first day, he paddled almost non-stop. With 40 knots of wind at the start, he delayed departure slightly until the wind had abated somewhat. Then, in good conditions, he paddled all night on the first night, clocking up 80 kilometers. He pulled over for some sleep at 4 a.m. However, he encountered a problem on the very first night. The problem was that he was extremely cold, so he made the only right decision: to turn back. Upon returning to shore, he wrote in his blog, "The Southern Ocean is cold place, and cold is dangerous. I've said many times to friends and family that safety is paramount." After assessing the risks, he realized that difficulties with staying warm while sleeping could be fatal, and this newly identified factor needed addressing. Andrew and his support team considered his decision to return responsible and correct. He spent the next few weeks at home, celebrating Christmas with his family and regretting not being able to see his parents, brother, and sister. During this time, he trained in the bay and tested a new sleeping system, a homemade hammock system that would keep him off the cockpit floor and help avoid pressure sore problems. Now he was ready for a second attempt, with only the weather holding him back. He waited for Cyclone Isabel to pass, and on January 11, 2007, Andrew McAuley set off once again on his long-awaited journey. He planned to reach Milford Sound on the coast of New Zealand by February 8. According to the plan, his family and friends would fly there to greet their hero on the scheduled date. The journey started well, and the forecast for the first couple of days was favorable. McAuley also made sure to take a few photos and videos in the kayak each day. He planned to show them upon his return to land. He had no books, no mini DVD player, and he didn't even take the iPod this time. The only thing left for him to do was paddle. On average, he covered 50 kilometers a day and felt good. In a week, he had covered nearly a quarter of the journey. He wrote to his family that his kayak had been overturned by waves a couple of times, but Casper simply popped him upright every time. Andrew was in really good spirits and said he had too much food. On January 22, he spent almost the entire day under Casper for the first time, waiting out a severe storm, as he wrote to his wife in the daily 5:30 p.m. report. After spending the entire daylight hours doing this, he decided to paddle through the night. From this point, the wind changed, making it easier for him to paddle. His boat was getting lighter too, as he ate his way through the supplies, which helped him pick up a bit of speed. Now he covered 80 kilometers daily. At this point, something unfortunate happens. His watch stops working. Now he didn't know the exact time and sent his daily report when it got dark, but he still did it on time. He also carefully monitored the battery status. Andrew could isolate one battery while charging accessories such as his phone, beacon, etc., leaving the dedicated bilge pump battery fully charged. The bilge pump had a deck-mounted switch for operation while paddling and another switch mounted inside a kayak for use when hauled up inside Casper during bad weather or at night. Both batteries could be fully charged from flat in approximately 20 hours. However, he tried to conserve power on everything, including keeping the communication device and the radio beacon turned off most of the time. On January 30, Andrew encountered another severe storm and asked himself for the first time, "What am I doing out here?" At this point, he had about 500 kilometers left to go, which gave him strength. After the storm, he discovered that Casper broke a pivot arm, but otherwise everything was fine. Moreover, the wind had subsided, allowing him to make up for lost time. On February 2, he told his wife that he was already imagining drinking a cold beer in Milford. But with 200 kilometers to go, his pace had halved. Andrew had been battling strong south currents and feeling like he was going nowhere, and that wasn't far from the truth. It looked like he had been drifting in the wrong direction overnight. As a result, he only managed to cover 25 kilometers in a day, prompting him to write about his delay. However, treacherous currents were not his main problem. The critical moment came on February 7, 120 kilometers from the shore. Another storm was far worse than he had anticipated. In fact, it was one of those great storms that make history. McAuley endured a 40-knot gale that knocked out his spare satellite phone and tracking beacon. The conditions were possibly the worst experience in the region since the storm that decimated the 1998 Sydney to Hobart Regatta, sinking 5 yachts and killing 6 crewmen. McAuley entered the 28th hour locked up in his kayak as the storm raged. From time to time, huge waves plunged the kayak into numerous barrel rolls, taking it to depths of up to 9 meters. The dangerous conditions certainly took their toll on the kayak, but Andrew managed to weather the fierce storm. No one expected him to report his position on time after such an ordeal, but Andrew managed to restore communication and report that he was alive and well. He also sent a message to his wife, "See you Sunday at 9 a.m. That same day, Vicky excitedly wrote on her social media page about her husband's imminent arrival in New Zealand. Only 120 kilometers left, and Andrew says he'll see us Sunday at 9 a.m. Meanwhile, Andrew soon realized that he was significantly behind schedule and rescheduled the much-anticipated meeting to February 11. This indicated that the Mirage kayak was still quite far from the coast of New Zealand. During this time, Andrew's wife, along with their young son and friends, arrived from Australia to Milford, where they started organizing a welcome party for Andrew. And at this very moment, after enduring terrible conditions, on a clear and relatively calm day, Andrew disappeared. February 9, 2007, the Tasman Sea. On February 9, at 7:15 p.m. local time, the New Zealand Coast Guard picked up an almost unintelligible signal from a vessel identifying itself as Kayak 1.
Considering your kayak is sinking, huh? And
It was a distress signal. The radio message was received by the New Zealand Maritime Operations Centre, but it was distorted and difficult to understand. Unfortunately for Andrew, no one believed his message. No one in New Zealand even fully understood what Kayak 1 was. They couldn't guess that it was a man in kayak in the middle of the ocean. McAuley's family suspected the radio message was a hoax, or perhaps an attempt by Andrew to make his nightly check-in by radio now that his satellite phone batteries were dead. A small search was launched, but nobody really believed McAuley could be in trouble. Moreover, they needed to determine the location of the kayak. They didn't have exact coordinates. The rescuers had to consider the time elapsed since the last confirmed position sent by Andrew a day earlier, as well as the weather forecast and the movement of ocean currents. The next day, on February 10, a search party with planes scoured the area of the sea where McAuley's kayak was likely to be. They found it. The overturned Mirage was drifting just 50 kilometers from the shore. Andrew McAuley had come so close to New Zealand. As the search team approached the kayak, they noticed that the boat was partially flooded, but the hull appeared to be in almost perfect condition, with only some cosmetic damage from the recent storm. The only thing missing from the cockpit, where Andrew had been during his journey, was the fiberglass capsule, and one of the capsule's pivot arms was damaged. The rescuers speculated that the Casper canopy had been torn off by a high wave during the storm. Nevertheless, the paddle, satellite phone, beacon, radio, camera with a memory card, and other equipment were all inside the kayak in good, undamaged condition. The only things missing were the canopy and Andrew. On Monday, February 12th, after 3 days of waiting and hoping to find McAuley alive, the search was called off, leaving behind only a set of theories and speculations. Indeed, many aspects of this story raise questions. What happened to Andrew if there was no storm after his last report? Why was he sinking and sending that distressing message? Why didn't he use all the available means of communication? Was he truly as well prepared as he thought? And was this endeavor doomed to fail from the start? But let's sort out what happened step by step. Paul Hewitson of Mirage Kayaks, the boat's designer and builder, inspected the kayak and some of the retrieved video footage. His best guess about what happened: McAuley capsized while the cockpit cover was not in place and was unable to get back in his kayak. Then somehow the paddler and kayak became separated. And here we come to an important point. The weather conditions at that time were described by Paul Hewitson as a southwest wind, 12 to 30 meters per second, with sharp sea swells. These can be considered dangerous conditions for a seafarer, but the region where this happened is crucial. Veteran sailor Jonathan Bargis, who was directing the expedition by providing weather predictions, said, "From the beginning, my biggest concern was the approach to New Zealand, and this part of the New Zealand is notoriously dangerous. On a good day, you can get rogue waves, a 2 or 3 meter set that can come out of nowhere. Not big, but powerful. That's very dangerous." I have no doubt that a wave got him. Thus, the main and most logical version of the events is that Andrew McAuley was hit by such a sudden and extremely powerful rogue wave at the moment when the canopy was behind him. One of the capsule's levers had broken earlier during the storm, and when the kayak capsized, the canopy submerged and filled with water like a bucket, making it difficult to ride the kayak. Andrew, who had fallen into the water with the kayak, exhausted from attempts to ride it and swimming in the cool 15-degree water, opened the rear hatch cover and retrieved the radio. McAuley had reported capsizing twice before and described the re-entry procedure as gnarly, complicated by the cockpit cover, video camera, and other gear mounted on the deck. He hoped not to capsize again, but his hopes were not fulfilled. It happened again. What happened next, you already know. he started to sink. For some reason, he was also not tethered to his boat. Apparently, he might have been holding onto the kayak's hull with one hand and the radio with the other when the current swept him away from the boat. Had he been tethered, he would likely have survived. Another point that many find puzzling is how an experienced adventurer like Andrew McAuley could neglect basic safety rules. During the preparation stage, Andrew decided that he would transmit news once a day at 5:30 p.m. However, a once daily report on such a mission seems inadequate since in 24 hours, you can drift far off course. Additionally, reliance on satellite communication and GPS required backup power from batteries, which were insufficient for such a long journey. This is why Andrew conserved energy, believing that these precautions were enough. He did not use the GPS beacon properly for automatic location transmission, instead manually turning it on each day when he deemed necessary. You might wonder, weren't there other ways for him to signal for help in an emergency? Yes, indeed. And that's the most intriguing part. After the capsize, McAuley may have unscrewed the rear hatch to access his radio beacon and dry suit. Perhaps while struggling into the dry suit, he got separated from his kayak and, with it, the beacon. Some have wondered why he didn't trigger his radio beacon right away. Tasmanian kayaker Laurie Ford writes on his website, "Andrew thinks the same as I do on this subject. An emergency radio beacon is a last resort. It is far better, if possible, to make contact by phone or radio and let people know the exact situation, rather than the huge panic and surge that an EPI beat generates." But the situation looked bad, and he was probably about to activate it once he was in the dry suit. It was the separation from the kayak that brought him undone. If the beacon had been activated, the kayak could have been precisely located and identified within minutes. Once the signal was received, a helicopter would have been dispatched immediately, and it would have reached the scene in less than an hour. Perhaps not wanting to create too much fuss and hoping for a rescue, Andrew neglected another opportunity to ask for help. There was a vessel within a couple of hours of his location that could have saved him. But for that, Andrew needed to send out an international Mayday signal, which he didn't do. Finally, after everything that happened, it's clear that Andrew should have had a clear radio call sign in his plan, which would have easily identified him and reduced the confusion regarding the identity of the person sending the signal. The call sign Kayak 1 ended up working against him. All of this seems like a series of fatal mistakes made by the experienced Andrew. He didn't anticipate that conserving energy would backfire, that at the moment he needed help, no one would know his exact coordinates. He also didn't expect that just a few sudden waves could cause so much trouble, and that all possible means of rescue needed to be activated immediately. However, it seems that the main mistake he made was shortly before he encountered trouble. He would soon guess that McAuley was probably getting tired and, with the mountains in sight, would be eager to reach land. He may have pushed too hard. When a small cold front came through, he possibly didn't think it necessary to put on his dry suit, which he'd planned to put on any time there was rough weather, and would have been reluctant to trade making the miles for hauling up beneath the canopy. Sadly, disaster has a proven habit of striking those who have almost reached safety. Nearly all mountaineering tragedies occur on the return from the peak, when muscles burn and concentration is narrowly focused on the goal. Andrew was so impressed by the proximity of the shore, so captivated by the imminent end of his adventure, that he didn't want to spend time on precautions and hurried to reunite with his family. The culmination of this tragic story was the farewell ceremony for Andrew. I'll say it right away, his body was never found, and he is still listed as missing. What was found was his camera, on which he had filmed fragments of his challenge. In his final days, McAuley conceded he may have miscalculated and pushed the boundaries too far. A self-portrait taken near the end of his journey bears scant resemblance to the confident, athletic face that appears in other photographs. His eyes are wild, cheeks drowned under a costly sheen of zinc oxide. Do you know what his last words on the video were? Everyone present at the ceremony heard them.
Kayak 1, your signal is muffled. Please repeat your message. Somebody just confirm your kayak is sinking. And